Thank you. I want to thank Peter, Susan, all those at the Bay Ridge Council on the Aging for once again on an off cycle putting this together. I want to add my words to all those that have been said today about the absence of Dan Donovan at this forum. It is, as a major party candidate, the Republican, Conservative, Independence candidate, he's got 3 nominations, and it is disrespectful, it is disgraceful that with 3 nominations of 3 parties, that he is not here today to talk to the people of our community and tell us why he wants to represent us in Washington. It is the most anti-democratic behavior in a campaign that I've ever seen, because this is not the first time he hasn't come. This, I think, Mr. Lane, is about the 3rd time that he hasn't shown up at a debate. It is disgraceful, it is disrespectful, and you know what? It's not that he's not here today, he's here. He's got a staff member in the audience videotaping everything I say. So he's here, his staff member is here. He can make it to the forum, but the candidate cannot. It is just outrageous, and I hope that that weighs in your decision on who to vote for in this election. I bring to you in this race my experience, because when somebody wins this race on the 5th, they get sworn in immediately. Immediately they get sworn in, if it's the next day, the day after. And the person who gets sworn in goes immediately to Washington and starts to act, right? So if you want someone who can hit the ground running, you look to me, because I have the 18 years, it's my 18th year as a legislator, and we're running for a legislator's job. And that's what a member of Congress is, a legislator's job. And I have 18 years experience in the Senate and in the City Council, and that's opposed to no experience on the other candidates here. So it's 18 years versus 0, and for someone who has to hit the ground running, get sworn in right away, I think if you want to go with someone in 18 years, I don't have to watch a video on how to be a legislator, right? Also, I'm the only one in this race who has represented both sides of the bridge. I've represented, obviously, as you all know, the Brooklyn side of the bridge in Senate and City Council. But I've also represented the Staten Island end of my district when I was in the state Senate. So I have knowledge of both sides of the bridge and this entire district. I'm also the only one that has served both in the minority and the majority. So I know how to get things done, even when I'm in the minority, because in the state Senate I've proved that with the sales tax, repeal the sales tax on clothing and shoes, the epic increase in the epic drug program. Those were my bills. Those were bills that eventually got passed in the state Senate. This is a call to action. This election is a call to action, and I'm going to Washington to give voice to your concerns, because right now, what's going on in Washington, for which we have no voice, is a very anti-New York agenda, anti-New York City agenda. The budget that was passed by the House Representatives, the Republican leadership, is an anti-New York City budget. It hurts the middle class, it hurts seniors, it hurts those who want to send their kids to college. Absolutely, that's why. Hurts the poor and those who want to get into the middle class. For seniors, it puts on the table changes to the Medicare program, to the Medicaid program, and to Social Security. Those changes would hurt New Yorkers. It would change Medicaid into a state grant program, and the federal government would lose control of it. It would make Medicare a voucher program where you would have to go negotiate your Medicare benefits with your insurance company. That's not a good plan, and certainly it takes the Social Security cost of living adjustments and moves them down, not up, it goes down. Now, we don't live in Kentucky, we live in New York, right? And it costs a lot of money to live in New York, so we have to deal with lower cost of living adjustments, just not going to be fair. But nobody's down there speaking for us in this district. Certainly, and it also defunds the Older Americans Act. Older Americans Act is the act that has funded the Meals on Wheels, the nutrition programs, all the things that keep seniors independent. Right now, the Republicans have no plan to refund the Older Americans Act. one of the things I want to do is go there and say the Older Americans Act has to be funded this year. So I have a plan, I have a vision to save Social Security, to keep it secure for decades to come, to save Medicare so that we don't have to always worry about Medicare running out of money also. And also I want to be able to bring funds back, federal money back to this district so that we can do the things that federal money can help us to do with infrastructure and the Highway Trust Fund. I'll explain more during our talks. So bring back money to the district, help fight the bad budget that the Republicans are proposing, the anti-New York City budget, but also do the good things that we can do as a member of Congress who has a plan, who has a vision, who has a dedication, who has an energy, and really a sense of duty to get it done. What you've seen of me in the Senate and in the Council, you'll see of me as a member of Congress. I thank you and look forward to talking during this
I'm going to take the opportunity. I'll use 2 minutes. I'm running. Yes, I am going to do. The First Amendment prevails here. Okay, I'm going to run. I'm the only human rights candidate, by the way. I think I agree with much of what Vinny said. I don't need that. Okay, I agree with much of what he said. My problem is with some of his backers. The reason, again, that I'm running as a write-in candidate is because Mr. Gillis was among those in the very controlled Democratic Party in Staten Island who didn't even give me an opportunity to seek the nomination. Okay. I know things about the Green Party. I'm sure why the Green Party has the candidates. My positions are almost identical to theirs, except on Tibet. Apparently, you know nothing about that. I also have information, by the way, on the facts of what happened to Eric Garner. It appears one of the things that Mr. Donovan is covering up is that Daniel Pantaleo, the cop who everybody saw, lied before the grand jury. He said it wasn't a chokehold. He claimed it was a seatbelt maneuver. A seatbelt maneuver goes that way, etc. And that is one of the things that Mr. Donovan is covering up about. I've discussed this among other people with Erica Garner, Eric's daughter, by the way. I live in that town. And another thing that and I hope if you do get elected, Vinny, you'll be an upset if you do, because you have to beat me. Anyway, that they will look into police corruption at the 120th Street and victimized there. You know about it, etc. They also have to look into anti-Semitism in Staten Island, of which a member of the Democratic Party is a prime exponent. I'm talking about David Jones, who should not be, who's known as the Israel basher. He happens to be Debbie Rose's campaign manager, etc. Anyway, I will not speak as long as Fidel Castro. Vote for me. And by the way, we have to do something about the Tibetan situation. That's it. This is the Tibetan flag. Free Tibet and free Staten Island. Thanks a lot. Vote for me as a write-in. I'm Tom Weiss. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad to bring the First Amendment back.
Thank you,
back
Tom.
to
Tom now.
Okay. And you can ask me any question you want.
Welcome to the Bay Ridge Council on Aging Forum. I'm hoping it's going to be a good forum. We're hearing from wonderful people. I have some questions for the candidates. Some of this you might have stated in your opening address, but what made you decide to run for this congressional seat? Mr. Lane, why are you running for this seat?
Yeah, okay, 3 minutes. Well, that was my opening statement. So why I decided to run is, I want to be somebody that champions legislation to help make everyone's lives better. As Mr. Gentile said, yes, I don't have legislative experience, but I've worked in the private industry for 30 years. I'm a VP at my job, so I know how to manage a team of people to actually get the job done. So, as far as not having particular legislative experience, all you have to be is be a strong captain to get the most solid people that have the best integrity to work for what the people are asking for. One of the things I would love to do as a congressman is actually have offices that are getting all the feedback from the people on exactly what the people are asking for, not on what the candidate is thinking, oh, I think that people need this. This is how I do things in the private sector, and this is what I would love to bring to Congress. A real collective thought process on making the best decisions that make sense for all the districts, all the neighborhoods that I'll be representing in the district. And so this is why I decided to run. I want to bring democracy back to Congress, because for far too long, politicians have given politics a bad name in this country, and I want to change that.
Thank you. Vincent.
Well, Peter, you know, I love the job that I'm doing as the member of the City Council representing the 43rd Council District here in Bay Ridge and other parts in this area. Certainly that is a job that I love and continue to do. But as the new Congress started to take over in January, you know, I wasn't chosen as a candidate until end of February, beginning of March, I think it was. But as I saw what was happening in Washington when we did not have a voice, and the Republican Congress passed the budget that, as I said, was very, very much against middle-class values, middle-class tax policy, and also very anti-New York City. I realized that someone had to step up to the plate and get to Washington and speak for the people, not only in this district, but across New York City. And when the other candidates that were considering running from Staten Island did not run, and they asked me to consider it, that's when I certainly did. And I think it's important, the fact that I know this district so well, having represented Staten Island as well as Brooklyn, made me, I think, the logical choice to be the candidate. So when they asked me, I said yes, I would step up to the plate because of the serious issues that are going on right now that we need to get somebody down there as fast as possible.
You all know why I'm running, so I don't want to get into this trouble by speaking too much, but the reason I'm running, human rights is the most important. I did mention one thing about Tibet, okay? That country has been suffering under what is the longest running genocide in the world today. It is a racial genocide. The Tibetans are a dark race, the Chinese, and Obama does. This is one area where I disagree profoundly with Mr. Obama, who seems only concerned about the economic relationship between us and the world's #2 power. What is going on in that country is very similar to what happened to the Jews, etc. Okay? I have discussed this with, among other people, with Congressman Nadler, with a Republican Congressman, Chris Smith in New Jersey, and also gotten a nice letter of support from none other than Elizabeth Warren, who probably will rise over his worst nightmare. We have to deal with that, okay? Tibetans are quiet, they've been genocided, etc. My emails are read by the Dalai Lama. It's a major matter. I asked Mr. Lane about it when he first ran. His answer was, I'm only dealing with domestic issues. Mr. Lane, if you go to Congress, you're going to have to deal with that. I'd be interested in your position on independence for Tibet. Thanks.
Are you enjoying yourself, Tom?
Are you enjoying it?
Yes, I am.
I'm sure you are.
Well, my next question was going to be, what issues will you focus on when elected? But I think that's going to be very evident from the questions you're going to be asked. What sets you apart from the other two candidates?
3 candidates.
Mr. Gentile, what sets you apart from Mr. Donovan, who should be here, and Mr. Lane, who is here?
The first thing that sets me apart is that I show up, right? I am present, and frankly, people have said to me, I don't know how you do it, you seem to be everywhere all the time. But that's the commitment I have, to be everywhere all the time, because this seat belongs to you. I represent you, whether it be the City Council or the State Senate or Congress. I represent you, so part of my duty is to be present and to be here listening to you and getting feedback and interacting with you. That is the role of an elected official. So one of the things that sets me apart, and I would say Mr. Lane also, and even Tom, is that we show up and we interact with the people who we seek to represent. Also, as I said, you know, this is the kind of job that you got to go and run and start doing things right away, because you don't get a month and a half to get prepared after election before you get sworn in. In this kind of job with a vacant seat, the minute you're certified as the winner, you get sworn in and you're down there as the representative from the 11th Congressional District. So you have to know what's going on, you have to know what to do. So 18 years experience, I think, really, really sets me apart from everybody else in this race, because I know what it means to be a legislator, and I know what to do when I get down there, and who to talk to and how to negotiate, and the issues that we need to work on. So that, I think, is a major issue. The fact is that I've been elected official for since 1997 in this part of Brooklyn, so I know this area extremely well. I know the issues, I know the people here, so I think you would want to send someone down there who has that kind of familiarity with the people in this area.
So the first thing that sets me apart is I'm a Green Party candidate. And what that means is the Green Party candidates don't accept any donations from corporations, political action committees and such. We only accept donations from the people. So once again, we represent the people. All of their wishes and dreams is what I'm standing for. You know, Tom mentioned that he's the only human rights candidate, which is a lie. It's a straight up lie because, well, as I mentioned before, you know, grassroots democracy, ecological wisdom, nonviolence, and social justice are our pillars. And human rights falls under that. So for someone to just come out and blast that, it's you know, just a straight up lie. So that would set me apart from him, is that I don't tell lies like that. And he manages to always mention that we have partial conversations, and he likes to talk about like bits and pieces of them and use that as fact. So I don't believe in that. Another thing, one of the things I'm talking about on my platform is a straight up end to police brutality. You know, I want independent investigation and prosecution of police brutality cases. You know, I'm not for this militarization that we have of our police against poor and communities of color. I mean, we've seen this being used as a way to move people out of the neighborhood to allow richer people to come in. And there's overdevelopment. In New York City, there's a lot of attachment to real estate over the needs of the people here. We've seen neighborhoods, more and more high-rises going up, and yes, human resources like libraries and schoolhouses and fire departments, police stations, and you know, everything that people need being decreased. And nobody's fighting for that. This affordable housing is a joke. If you want to get affordable housing, the median salary that you need is so high. That's like rich to me. You know, one of the things another thing that I'm pushing for, which is different from my Democratic opponent, is I'm pushing for a $15 an hour minimum wage, because too many people in this country are struggling. You know, that brings a $15 an hour minimum wage brings somebody up to $30,000 a year. In New York State, that is still poverty wages. New York State should actually even be increased to $20. So I would like federally $15, and each state, based on their standard of living, should be able to increase that. So those are a few, and the final thing that I'm running for is a Green New Deal. Right now, a lot of our elected officials are attached to fossil fuel corporations, and they don't see any other way out of our climate crisis that we face but building more pipelines, more oil rigs offshore, and we're trying to build an infrastructure to provide people with public living wage jobs by building infrastructure for solar, wind, thermal, and clean, green, 100% renewable energy by 2030.
Thank you. What's happening? You are learning about these candidates and why one of them, or you will be voting for someone to go to Washington. I wish we did hear from Mr. Donovan on some of these issues, on why he's running, what his issues are, and what he would be doing if and when he did go to Congress. There is a taxable maximum wage for paying into Social Security. This year it is $118,500. What that means is, if you're working and you make over $118,500, you do not contribute into Social Security anymore. Social Security says thank you, and you have paid enough money into it. Do you support raising the Social Security payroll cap? And do you have another plan for Social Security, and what is it? And we'll start with Vinny this time, please.
Yes. Okay, that's exactly the position that I have said would save Social Security for decades to come. To lift the cap on contributions to Social Security. Because once, as Peter said, once you make that income at a certain point, and now it's $118,500, once you reach that salary and that income, you no longer pay into the Social Security system. So all of us who make less than $118,000 a year are paying all the time, right? We're paying all the time into Social Security, but those who make above $118,000 stop paying into Social Security. So the people who could probably afford it the most are not paying into Social Security, and as a result, we always have this problem of Social Security running out of money. If we do that one simple thing, lift the cap so that no matter what your income, you contribute to Social Security, that one action would make Social Security secure for decades to come, and that's one of my goals as a new Congress member. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is one of those things where we just talked about our differences. This is one of the things we totally agree on. I mean, there's no reason, this goes into my overall platform too, about taxing corporations and the richest 1% of this country. You know, like you said, there's no reason that we should have a cap of $118,000 on this, when we have people that live in Manhattan that are billionaires. You know, if we just said, you know what, just in Manhattan, if you look just in Manhattan, we're going to release the cap, we could probably fund Social Security for years to come. We could put the secure back in Social Security by just getting those people. You know, and this is something that has been way overdue for too long, and it's been this fear of, you know, we're not going to have anything in the future if we don't do this. It's like, no, the simplest thing to do is raise that cap and do it now.
I agree with all that.
Thank you, Tom.
You enjoying yourself?
This is an issue that not only affects New York City, New York State, but the entire country. So, gentlemen, what is your stand on hydrofracking, both on federal lands and on state lands? Very quickly, hydrofracking, when they used to drill for oil or gas, you saw John Wayne in all the movies putting up, and James Dean putting oil wells down, they would go straight down into the ground, hit a pocket of oil, the oil would come up, and they would become rich. Today what they found they could do is they could go sideways, up to 3 to 4 miles sideways. And then they would push down into the earth millions of gallons of water and a lot of other stuff, and explode the drilling pipe that they put in there, releasing methane and or oil. The problem is they now have to remove the water that they put in, and that water becomes poisonous. So, gentlemen, on hydrofracking, where do you stand?
So 2 years ago, I ran for public advocate in New York City, and my 8-year-old, my 8-year-old explained the horrors of hydrofracking. You know, because as the Green Party, ecological wisdom, you know, we were the only group in New York to say, we need an all-out ban on hydrofracking. A lot of other environmental groups that were working with us for this fight said, well, let's put in a moratorium on it. It's like, no moratorium, because what happens with that, people will wait, and they say, you know, we have no other alternative, we have to hydrofrack. That is not a solution. So the Greens stand very strongly that hydrofracking is bad, and we've seen across the country where property values go down because the lands are poisoned after this process gets through, with the methane going into the water, and it's death, and for more than many reasons. So strongly against hydrofracking. My biggest concern now too, though, even though we have a ban against hydrofracking in New York State, we have horrors of pipelines coming in that are pumping in fracked gas through Spectra pipelines and all these other pipelines. So that's another level. Like, even though we don't frack in this state, we have pipeline projects that are coming in from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and whatever. Into Staten Island, exactly. And right off of Jacob Riis Park, which is like a national parkland. We need to fight these as well too. So any subsidiary of hydrofracking needs to be stopped. and look for clean, green, renewable energies by 2030.
I think that's correct, because the fact is that there have been numerous studies that have been done. In fact, the governor did a study about whether or not we should allow hydrofracking in New York State, and upstate, near the watershed. And it was determined based on that study that it was too risky. It was too risky to allow that kind of drilling to occur because of what Mr. Lane just said. The risk and the result could be poisoning of the water because of the process that they use. And if we were to poison the watershed, that would be a major disaster here in New York City, because it's the watershed that provides the clean water that we use every single day. So why would we risk doing that to ourselves? So I'm against hydrofracking. I agree with the governor and his decision not to allow it in the state of New York. I think that was the right decision.
I agree.
I had a lot of questions that the committee put together for our candidates. Some of the questions are going to be asked by you from the audience, because I've just been going over the questions you would like of the candidates. And I will bring you up later, and you can ask your candidates the questions, the gentlemen who are running. Something is happening in Washington, which is very interesting. Should there be a federal law mandating that a photo ID be shown before one can vote?
Yes.
Vinny?
No.
Well, you know, obviously, I don't know about a photo ID, but obviously there should be some identification of the person who presents themselves to vote, because we've heard too many stories about voter fraud and things that happen on election day. I mean, all of us who've run before can tell you stories about what happens on election day. So whether it's a photo or something, there should be some kind of identification presented that is secure on election day before you're able to vote.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting too that they bring this up, because when you first register to vote, I remember, you know, you get a voter card in the mail. Why can't that be enough identification? It doesn't make sense. You know, it's just another way to do voter repression in this country, to scare people away from the polls. We saw this in Florida in 2000. People were getting scared away and couldn't vote for their candidates back then. So just a voter ID card, when you register to vote, should be sufficient.
Thank you. We're going to go on to charter schools. Charter schools is a synonym for private schools. Each and every dollar taken from public education and given to a charter school is money taken away from the public school system. Are you for or against charter schools, and why? And there'll be a follow-up, which would be, how can you justify federal monies going to private corporations, which are what charter schools are? So charter schools, Mr. Lane.
So yeah, charter schools are definitely that weird gray area, and it shouldn't be. You know, like we said before, charter schools are using public resources, are using public money, using public space, but yet they're operating as a private corporation. That is not right. And they're being pitted against public schools that are struggling for funds, struggling for, you know, teachers. Well, it's not even any better teachers. The teachers need resources, and they're not getting it. And so their students may not be doing as well in these standardized testing people are pushing that the charter schools seem to be sort of teaching towards. And that's an unfair scale to put anybody in. And so I'm strongly against the current charter school situation, and I'm for public schools. I want quality funded public schools. That's what we should have. Every public school should be able to get as much money as a charter school gets. Charter schools have millions of dollars. Public schools, my son's in a public school. We have to donate money. We have to have fundraisers all the time to keep programs like dancing and art and music in our schools. You know, and there's some families that can't afford to donate. So we fundraise even twice as hard to keep those programs in for those families. So charter schools, no, not under the current structure, and public schools, quality funded public schools, yes.
There is a school in Coney Island that I'm aware of, and I'm sure this can be told on schools around the city, where there is a public school and a charter school in the same building. When you on the charter school side of the building, all of a sudden you have beautiful computer rooms. You have beautiful newly painted classrooms, art rooms. You have all the technology you could want. You have beautiful cafeterias. Then you walk over to the public school side of the same building, and you don't have enough textbooks. You don't have enough. You don't have room for a science lab. You might not even have the gym because they have to use it for classroom space. It is almost a tale of two schools in the same building when you're in the charter school versus when you're in the regular public school. That should not be. That should not be. Why are those students less important and less valued than the ones in the charter school? If we're going to fund charter schools, we have to have dedicated funding for charter schools, not funding that comes from the regular public school budget, because that's what happens. You get two types of education: those who can get into the charter school and those who don't. And that's not right. We shouldn't be using public money to favor certain students over other students. So I'm opposed to taking charter schools and giving them money at the expense of the regular public schools.
I agree.
There is a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour.
We finally got the answer to that, huh?
There's a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, which is $290 a week, and it adds up to $15,080 a year. And that's before federal, state, and city taxes, Social Security, and Medicare are taken out. What do you consider to be a living wage, and could you, and I'll ask the audience, could you live on that amount of money, and could you raise a family on less than $15,000 a year? Vinny?
Yes. This is certainly one of the issues that I've been talking about in the campaign. So has Mr. Lane also about the minimum wage. The federal minimum wage at $7.25 is not a livable wage in New York City. You cannot live on $7.25. And so what we need to do is raise it to $13 an hour. Certainly that would at least be a step in the right direction, and then index it to inflation. By doing that, you at least give people the opportunity to make ends meet. Right now, people are working full-time jobs and they still can't pay the bills at the end of the month. They can't pay for food at the end of the month because the fact is the wages are low, too low. It's interesting now that my opponent, Dan Donovan, is not here. He thought the minimum wage was only for college students. You didn't realize that 75% of the people who get minimum wage are adults. They're adults. It's not just for college students. But that's what he said to a reporter. It's a college student thing. He's out of touch, doesn't even know. And when I asked him what the minimum wage was, the federal minimum wage, had no idea. He talked all around the issue. I don't know if you saw the televised debate on New York One. Could not answer what the federal minimum wage was, and he wants to fight for the middle class. It's not going to happen if you don't even know what the federal minimum wage is. So what we need to do is raise it to 13 and then index it to inflation, because it'll give people an opportunity to be able to make ends meet, and then with the little extra money they might have, they become better consumers. They consume more in the community, and that stimulates business, and that helps everybody. So that's really what we need to do. My opponent has never said that the federal minimum wage should go up. And therefore, I think that you should take that into consideration. Because right now, we cannot, it's not a livable wage, and it's not realistic for our part of the country.
As I mentioned before, I'm calling for a $15 hour now minimum wage. I mean, as I mentioned before, even $15 an hour just brings you to $31,000 a year. We've seen across the country that is not enough to raise a family. It's not. Rents. People are spending more in rent than they are, for anything. It's amazing because actually people are spending more than rent than they're actually taking in for income. So how is that even possible? And a lot of people, even though they're making $31,000, they're actually making more money than they can to apply for public resources like food stamps. So it's like you're making too much for public assistance, but you're making too little to survive. And it's just this cycle that puts people into these horrible situations where who knows what will happen. I'm calling for $15 an hour now. We need it. As last week we're out in the streets marching for that against people who are saying, what are you going to do? You're going to collapse the whole system for everybody with $15 hour minimum wage. But we say we need $15 an hour now because the rent won't wait. Rents are going up. Fares are going up on the bridges, on the tunnels, on the subways. Everything's going up, but our minimum wage has been stagnant. But yet, we always find money to bomb another country, to build a new drone plane, to build a new fighter, to militarize our police. There's money out there, and we can make this happen. So that's why I'm running once again.
All you have to do is take a look at some of the CEO salaries. And they say they can't afford it. Also, by the way, if you raise the minimum wage, people then will be able to go off food stamps. People who are on food stamps now are the people who are making that minimum wage. So what they're doing is they're robbing all of us to pay the CEOs. Once people, their buying power increases, they no longer have to rely on food stamps, and that then adds money to the revenue stream that funds everything else. So it's cost effective. I agree with Vinny, and I agree with him. I think $15. Nobody can tell me that a CEO salary is worth 8,000 times value of somebody like us, or like the school teachers, or like the cops, or anybody else. It's a complete and total ripoff, okay? There's no need for it. And that's one area where I agree with the Democrats. The Republicans are basically allowing this to happen. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton's on their side.
Thank you, Todd. Okay. The next question concerns Roe versus Wade. And Roe versus Wade concerns a woman's right to choose. How would you vote on a woman's right to freedom of choice? Ms. Pillay.
Of course, the woman has the right to choose. I mean, a government telling an individual what they should do with their body is just wrong. I have always been for a woman's right to choose.
People have different religious views about this issue, but ultimately, it's up to the person to decide and not government to decide the final issue. So I support a woman's right to choose.
I do also. I think it should be a last resort. I used to work in a city hospital where women were getting abortions because they, mostly poor women, who felt that they had no other option. Okay, there are other options. I think I would not interfere with a woman's right to choose, but it should be, because I do believe that life is sacred. Okay, it does end a life. It should be the ultimate last resort. And in this society, we're providing the kind of support services for young mothers, they might be in a position to choose other options. So my belief is that abortion should be the ultimate last resort. That's where I come from.
I happen to agree. They should be legal, safe, but rare.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, and so if we're talking about alternative resources where a woman is allowed to bring her baby into this world, a lot of times that option is to put them into adoption, into foster care. So if we're going to do this, we need serious reform in our adoption and foster care system. I'm an adoptee. I was adopted when I was 2 years old, and I didn't know that until I was 23. And New York State has kept my original birth certificate a secret to me. Even, I had to look for 25 years to find my mother. And I had to use personal resources and borrow from people to get a private investigator to find my family.
And
nobody should have to do that. Knowing your lineage, your history, your medical history, everything is a basic human right. So if you're going to have an alternative to abortion, you need to have some serious adoption reform in this country and around the world. And one last thing on this is that we have adoptees that are being brought in from other countries and raised by our people here in America. And those adoptees, I have to let people know, are not American citizens unless they go through the process to become citizens. And I've seen so many, my brothers and sisters out there from other countries being deported based on our unfair immigration laws. And that's another thing we have to address.
Thank you, gentlemen. Right now in Washington, there's a big push to reduce taxes. And if they do reduce taxes, where does the money come from? This is the question I'm asking. To support the services needed to run a country. How will you, when in Congress, ensure that the programs in our senior centers, our art classes, our computer courses, our Meals on Wheels programs, this center, the Fort Hamilton Senior Center, continues to stay open and functioning? Mr. Lane.
So yeah, it is very interesting. There's always this question on reducing taxes. When I've said before, we need to tax the people that aren't getting taxed right now. As you mentioned, 8,000 times the salary, the McDonald's, the CEO of McDonald's makes that. It's ridiculous. How much money does this person need? You know, if I get paid $100, I gotta pay about like $30 in taxes. If someone at McDonald's, the CEO of McDonald's makes $100, he gets paid maybe like $3 maybe. You know, that is not fair. We need a fair taxing structure across everybody, across corporations and across the wealthiest 1%. And that will bring back funding to our community centers, to our schools, to our seniors, to our Medicare system, to jobs, living wages. Everything will be funded. And once again, we really want to get some money back. Let's reduce those military budgets, because I was in the military and I know what military budgeting is all about. It's like, hey, we got $1 million this year. What are we going to do? Well, let's spend it all so we get $1 million next year. They have a surplus. They don't need more money. They need to start reducing their budgets, because we've seen out in the field, in the battlefield, even the soldiers aren't getting the support they need. They're not getting the equipment they need. So where's all this money going to? I know it's going to the private corporations that are working with the military right now. And it's such a game, and we're the ones that are paying the brunt of this game. So, as I mentioned before, fair tax across the corporations and the 1%, and that'll fund a lot of these programs.
One of the things that the Republican budget in the House of Representatives does, as a budget that Mr. Donovan supports, is that it cuts the tax rates for the wealthiest Americans in the country. Cuts the tax rates, lowers those tax rates at the expense of you and me, and certainly that hurts us. That hurts health programs, it hurts senior programs, it hurts college programs. Those programs, they're cutting the budget on those programs, and in return, lowering the tax rate for the wealthiest Americans. That's the Republican budget that they're putting on the table and that Mr. Donovan supports. So what we need to do is fight back and say, you know what? And many of us don't even realize this. There are corporations in this country that pay no tax. They pay no tax because of the loopholes that now exist in the law, plus the fact that they take their profits all overseas, and they keep their profits overseas. And when they're overseas, they don't pay tax on those overseas profits. So you and I are paying taxes, but the biggest corporations are paying nothing. That, to me, and it should be to you, is not fair, right? We need to close those tax loopholes so those corporations have a civic responsibility to this country and have a civic responsibility to pay taxes like other corporations, other businesses, and people. Because you know what? What we need to do is take that corporate money that's overseas and put a one-time tax on that overseas money. If we did it at 8.75% and we tax that money, we get $120 billion to put into the Highway Trust Fund that will help rebuild our roads, so we don't have to run over these potholes all the time, right? as we see now. And it would help us. We'd also get another $50 billion to put into a new infrastructure fund that would help us do things like the elevators we've been talking. How long have we been talking about elevators at the subway station, right? 86th Street? How long have we been talking about that, right? There's no federal money for that. There's no federal money. If we were to do this one thing and tax corporations on their overseas profits that are now taxed at zero, we would have that money in the Federal Highway Trust Fund to do those kinds of projects. So it's just an unfair structure. We need to fix it, and that's what I propose to do. The Republican budget does the opposite. It cuts our programs and benefits those at the top by lowering their tax rates.
I'll be really quick about this. I'm going to mention two words. When you go to the computer, look up a man by the name of Henry George. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, because the gentleman sitting right back there who's an expert. Raise your hand now. Over there. He's not only a Quaker, he's an economist. Henry George was a 19th century economist who believed he was profoundly disgusted with predatory capitalism, plus of not having to suffer with a government to rinse you off instead of a corporation. And he came up with an idea of something called a land value tax, where you tax the value of the land, and that would be a way to do. And there's a bill in the Congress that's introduced by whoever goes there. It's probably going to be me. Congressman Ellison introduced a bill. It's called a stock transfer tax, which would place a tiny little tax on these major toxic, write this up, okay, on these transfers between hedge funds for billions of dollars, okay? The financial industry, to which the government is certainly attached, opposes that, okay? It's introduced, I don't remember the full name of it, but look up Congressman Ellison. He's the only Muslim congressman in Congress, by the way. He's a Democrat from Minnesota. So there are alternatives. And by the way, about Henry George, he wasn't just some kind of radical economist. He ran for mayor in New York City in 1886 to, like I did as an outsider, finished ahead of Teddy Roosevelt. Look him up. Henry George, look up Henry George, economist. And he made a difference, okay? Remember that's not on.
So Tom brought up a great point about the stock transfer tax. Because right now in New York State, we do have a stock transfer tax with Wall Street. But guess what we do with our stock transfer tax on Wall Street? We give Wall Street a rebate at the end of the year because we're afraid to lose them to New Jersey. So what's the point of collecting a tax if we're going to give it right back to the people? So these are the kinds of things. So one of the things in my platform too is having a national transaction tax. And so regardless what New York wants to do, we still keep these monies in. So thank you for bringing that up.
Co-sponsor that bill too.
Yes,
unless I continue.
We'll give you a job on the
All right,
Thank you. A little change of pace before I call you up from the audience. No, one question for Mr. Lane. Oh, absolutely. Mr. Lane, as a newly elected congressman, have you given any thought as to where you would move into the 11th Congressional District, Brooklyn or Staten Island?
Well, right now, the reason I jumped into this race was because everyone jokes at the fact that Staten Island is a forgotten borough. And so I want to move to Staten Island because we saw the effects of Hurricane Sandy and what's going on over there. We've seen what's going on with Eric Garner and police brutality. So I want to move to Staten Island, and I want to be on the front lines of fixing a lot of these issues.
I live in this.
I've also lived in all 5 boroughs and wound up by accident in Staten Island. I lived in State the last working class districts in that borough, which is being gentrified. It's on the North Shore. I've given it a new name like Soho. I'm calling it No Show. Okay, the developers are going nuts there. Okay, I hope they don't throw me out. Okay.
Vinny, with your twin sister living in Staten Island, I guess if you get elected, they're going to be over there quite often also.
Yes, absolutely.
Both sides of the bridge.
Well, as an elected official in Staten Island, I'm committed, and I've shown it as a state senator, to be very committed to Staten Island also. In fact, I did such a good job as a state senator being so present out there that the Staten Island Advance endorsed me twice for re-election and said that I was active and a presence in the entire island. So the fact is that that's the same kind of commitment that I would give Brooklyn, I would give to Staten Island also.
I do have here that we're going to allow you to ask each other questions, but But before we do that, I think we should get all the questions in. Are you Ray?
Yeah.
Ray, will you please come up
The
and...
question was for Mr. Donovan, but he's not here.
Oh.
Okay, then let me read the
Yes,
question.
Chair.
Would you like to read it?
Okay. My question was for our district attorney in Staten Island, but he's not here. Very simple question. What is his position on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security? What changes does he favor, and what should remain the same?
Well, I can tell you, although he should be here to speak for himself, the Republican budget that he would go into the Congress supporting does all the things I told you, changes Medicare, changes Medicaid, and decreases the cost of living adjustment on Social Security. That's the Republican budget that they just passed a couple of weeks ago in the House of Representatives. He would be going into that Republican caucus with that Republican agenda. That's all we can say because he's not here. All I can say is he's going into that Republican agenda, that Republican caucus that has the agenda to cut Social Security, change Medicare, and change Medicaid for the worse.
Susan Lavin, you have a question. Please come up.
Hi, all. As a parent, and of course we have a lot of grandparents here too, the concern is the federal loans for the students. It's really disheartening. Taking the unsubsidized collects the interest while they're still in school and it escalates. In graduate school, the loans are, oh my God, the interest rates are so high that I can't sleep at night worried. What can we do to help the kids? Can we have a cap? Can we have interest to start when they graduate? And also, what I notice as a middle-class family, we really don't get anything, you know, because I have to work, I work 2 or 3 jobs myself to help the kids. But the sad part is Perkins loans would be great and maybe more subsidized, but as graduate students are also struggling big time. And it's just very sad. Debt is unbelievable. So please help us.
Susan, I think you're right. We need to allow students to defer some of the interest on until they're employed at least, and do that. But I think one of the biggest things we can do to help students and to get tuitions under control, because right now tuitions are skyrocketing every year, and that's why it's causing students to take more and more debt in student loans, because they have to meet these skyrocketing tuitions. What we could do is pass legislation that would require the colleges to share the risk on federally subsidized student loans. Because right now, they have no risk. If a student has so much debt and they default on their student loans, the colleges have no consequence, no risk in that. It's all on the American taxpayer if the students default on student loans. So if we require the colleges to share the risk on the federally subsidized student loans, guess what happens? They might think twice about skyrocketing tuition every year because they realize that in the end, if the student can't pay the loan, they're going to be responsible at least for part of the defaulted loan. And that may help, that may give them pause to think about raising tuition every single year. It also would cause them to be sure, or to be better sure, that the students that they graduate are graduating with jobs, so that when they have the responsibility of paying back the loans, they have an income to pay back those loans. Again, I think making sure the colleges have some skin in the game will help to lower tuition costs and also lower the amount of student debt that we see happening.
I just think by doing that, they may not give out more loans.
Yeah, well, you know, we could write that. Yes, we could write that into the legislation.
I was just thinking if they could cap the interest, because some of the loans are up to 7%. And
Right.
while they're in college, it keeps
It
going.
is.
So if you're in graduate
Right.
school for 6 years with that interest, and it's just blind, you know. So
That could be part of the package.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Frank. Oh,
quality public schools. And what we're talking about now with these interest rates for these loans is a product of this profit over education, right? You know, and the rising cost of education in this country is just atrocious. What we need to do is fund. We need to have our city schools, our state schools, our universities. We need to bring the quality of education up in those. You know, because there was a time when people could go for college for free. Now, you go to college and you're in debt for 30 years. I mean, this is a situation that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be penalized because you want to make a better life for yourself. You should be rewarded. And so this is something that we've always been talking about. We've been talking about reducing this profit motive that they have in our education system and the best way to do it. So
I'm still paying my student loans.
Nowadays, you're saying.
Okay, Frank, is this you? Come on up. On timekeeper.
Timekeeper question?
Yes, the timekeeper. As a recent retiree of New York City Transit, I offer this question. I had an opportunity to travel a lot by rail over the last few years. And it was really very disheartening to take a trip to Washington, D.C., you know, through the Northeast Corridor and see the condition of the rails, of the buildings along the way. And I wanted to know what your position is on federal funding for Amtrak and possibly high-speed rail in this country.
Needs more money.
Well, Frank, that is an excellent question because we have the opportunity now to, through a bill that's a bipartisan bill in Congress right now, that would, by taxing those overseas profits I talked about, would bring in enough money for the Highway Trust Fund so that we can do projects, not only for the trust fund, but for new infrastructure fund, so that we have $50 billion in new money to do projects. And I would be one of those congressmen bringing some of that project money back to our neighborhood so that we can do projects and we could collaborate on national projects like high-speed rail. Those are projects of the future, and we need to look at that. Right now, there's no money in the Highway Trust Fund. It's going to go broke at the end of May. And right now, the Republicans who control the Congress are not interested in putting the money in the Highway Trust Fund. If that happens, then we're in real trouble. But what we propose as Democrats in the House is, and there are Republicans on this bill too, is to put the $120 billion in the Highway Trust Fund, plus the extra $50 billion that comes from this tax that would be on multinational corporations with their profits overseas. So it costs the American taxpayer nothing, zero to the American taxpayer, but we put sufficient money in the Highway Trust Fund to rebuild all the roads and another $50 billion to do new projects like the high-speed rail. So this is an exciting opportunity. I support this. I will be a co-sponsor of that bill. My opponent has said nothing about it, Mr. Donovan, and I think Mr. Lane has commented on it. But this is the moment we have to act. Somebody has to act, and I want to be part of that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, high-speed rail is, believe it or not, the way to the future. For a lot of, we look at our fuel emissions right now, cars, buses, planes. After the September 11th attack, when all the planes were grounded, they did a study on the air, and it said it was the best air that we had in the century. You know, and so I fully support government funding for the high-speed rail system, because I grew up on the trains. I love the trains. But, you know, one of the things is the costs for riding the trains are just astronomical. And we need to do something to bring those costs down to encourage people to want to ride them more. Because it is an efficient way to get to where we need to get to. You know, it's electric. You know, with the Green New Deal, we want to build more infrastructure to make those trains run more efficiently. There are still some diesel trains on the system for one reason or another, but this would create more public jobs to convert diesel trains into maybe biodiesel, or to put up the, you know, the infrastructure they need to run off of electric or solar or any other kind of alternative fuel source. So highway rail is a way to the future, oddly enough, you know, which was like the turn of the century. The rail was, you know, the steel horse. that we brought in as a way to transport people. So